we're going to apply and reset transformation values. So to reset a transformation value, or as Blender call it, clear, what that means, the transformation values go back to their default, or in math terms, it goes back to identity. But basically what that means, the translation or the move, you can see here in the properties here, it goes back to 0, rotations go back to 0, and scale goes back to 1 for all the axes. So one way you could visualize this, we have a transform here, as you can see in this editor, in the properties editor. As you see, this is the properties editor. And if you go over to the object property that we have selected, it's contextual, you'll see it's the transform location, which is also, they call it move. It could also be called translation, or they call it location here. There's rotation, and you have the mode here, and then you have the scale. But you could also go here, click on that little chevron thing on the side, and you'll get the transform that shows up in the 3D viewport in this editor. If you're in the 3D viewport here, you'll have that available for you. Another way you could bring that up is if you press the hotkey N on your keyboard, and that will show it and hide it. So now to actually, how does reset work? So let's say I go to the move tool and I move the object. If I go while in the 3D viewport, remember it has its own menu. If you go into the object part of the menu, go to clear, and then go to location, it's going to reset the location or the move or the translation or position, depending on what 3D software you call it, but it's going to go back to 0. Reset at 0, 0, 0 on all the axes. Now, if you go to rotation and do the same thing, rotate it around, you'll see that you have values here. Or I could click on here and you could see that it, under transform, if I click there, the same values. It's just another way to represent it. Remember, if you press Control Spacebar, you get full screen. And that way you can still have the transform here. The transforms of the object available, and don't have to have the editor for the properties editor open. Control Spacebar again to go back. And remember, you can do Control Spacebar to any editor to maximize it, to toggle it maximum screen or back. Well, back to this. If we're in the rotation here, you see there's values there. If you go to in the 3D viewport object, clear rotation, it's going to zero it back out. And go into scale, you'll have the same effect here. Right? The values are scale here, as you can see in the editor. The object properties here, in that section here, there's values are not, they should be back to 1. So if I go to object, clear, scale. Now you'll also notice that there's hotkeys. If you click over here, you'll see when you go to clear for location or translation or move or position, whatever you want to call it, it's Alt G. So if you go to the translation and there's values here, if I press Alt then G, it will reset it. For scale, for clearing, well, for rotation is Alt R. So if we go to rotation, rotate it a bit, see there's values here, Alt R would reset it. Same thing goes for the scale. It will be Alt S over here. So I click here, did scale and different axes, different values you can see here. Alt S resets that back. And to continue with the shortcuts you have here, you could also do shortcuts for the move. So we've been clicking on the menu here, but to get access to quickly select them, the hotkeys in Blender, if you press Shift and spacebar, then you get this floating contextual menu here that allows you to choose move, rotate, or scale. So if I choose rotate, you could select it that way. You could also do Shift spacebar and just press the letter afterwards. So G to move. That'll be the move tool. Shift spacebar, and then you click it, and after you could say R to rotate. Control Z to undo. Shift spacebar, S to scale. Shift undo, Control Z to undo. And there's also the transform manipulator. If you click that, that allows you to do all three of the transforms of move, rotate, and scale, all available for you to choose without changing. So I just moved it, I just rotated, and I just scale by clicking on the corresponding axis or icon or manipulator for that. As you can see, it changed the values for each one. Now, again, I could reset. One way you could reset them from here is if I could right click in the menu and choose reset all to default values. And that will be, when I say all, it's referring to where I clicked. If I'm in location, or also known as translation or move or position, when they say all, they just mean all for the location. It's not going to affect rotation or scale. But if I right click, but when I say all as well, it means all the axes for it. So if I right click and say reset all, it will reset all the location here. Then I can do the same thing, rotation, and right click and choose the same thing for scale. And when I say reset for scale, notice it goes back to 1, not 0. And the shortcut for this transformation menu is also in, if I click here, Shift spacebar, there's transform. You get that again. I can click here. If I do Shift spacebar, I also press T, you'll get that. And I just wanted to show one other thing. Let's say I do Shift spacebar, G for move. Let's say move it to on the Z axis, on the Y axis, and the X axis. If I want to just reset, let's say the Z axis, right click on it and say reset single to default value, and only that axis will get reset. Or I could right click and reset all. And you could do that for the rotation and the scale as well. The other shortcuts here, if you notice, there's the select box here that's selected here. Remember, if we were left click and hold it, you have the other types of select there, and we could tell there's more of a drop down because there's a little tick icon on the bottom right of that manipulator icon. The shortcuts for them, the hotkeys, if you do Shift spacebar, you see right now it says select box, but let's say I was in the move tool and do Shift spacebar and press B, choose select box, right? But there's other ones. There's a select circle, so it will be Shift spacebar C, and select lasso will be Shift spacebar L. So even though if I do Shift spacebar right now, I don't see it up here. If I do it's already Shift spacebar. If I press C now, it will choose the circle select mode, which is kind of like a painting mode. And the other one was Shift spacebar L. So if I do Shift spacebar, even though you don't see it here, if I press L, then it'll be the lasso tool. So that's another shortcut. So if I go back to box, Shift spacebar B, even though it wasn't showing up because it wasn't in the box mode, now I'm back in box select box mode there. Now the other option we're going to discuss, we did clear, which is basically reset the values back to their defaults, or the transformation, the move, the scale, the rotation. Another thing is to apply it. So for example, I choose the box, I'll move it. So again, I move it here, right? So now the box location is this location. If I were to right click and say reset all to default, it moved everything back because that was not the default position. But if you wanted, let's say, this to be the default position, how you would do it, you'll go to object. Well, notice here there's values here, right? In the translation, you go to object, apply, and then you can say location. Now notice the manipulator or the origin or the pivot of this went back to the origin or the 0 of the world, but the object is still here and the values are zeroed out for the location. So basically you apply the transformation. Well, I guess now it's applied it to the deformation, which we'll explain that later. And this is more for technical reasons. So even now, if I move it around and I say right click and say reset all, it goes back to this. This is now the default. So again, this is more for technical reasons that is probably more important in other disciplines such as rigging, modeling, and animation, which we'll probably go more in depth there. But just recall that option, this is how you do it, and it will be important later on. And of course, there's a hotkey for this as well. If you do Control A, you'll get the apply menu. So the menu up here for under object, apply, just pressing Control A will give you those options available to you here. So if I take this and let's say move it, it also works with rotation, right? So I'll use the hotkeys I mentioned here. You could press that button here, or you could press Shift, spacebar, R to get rotation. Let's say I'll rotate it. Remember, the pivot point's different, so it looks weird when it's rotating. And Shift, spacebar, S to scale it. Again, the pivot's not exactly where the box is, so it will get a different result. Now, if I want to reset all of these, you look at the transform or apply it. So this is now the new zeroed out you might hear as a term, or when you reset the values, the transformation, that's the reset position. Again, right click on each one here, location, or which is the move or the translation or the position, the rotation, then the scale. So if I right click on that, reset default values. So all of the, actually that's reset. I want to apply. So apply is Control A and then do location. So that reset back for the location, we reset back to the origin, but the rotation and the scale haven't. So do Control A, do rotation next. So now all the rotation's been like baked into the deformation or the points, but that the actual values went back to zero for rotation and for location. And to scale, Control A, scale. And now that went to 1. And of course, Control A, you see in all transforms, which probably is here too, all transforms. So I didn't have to do them individually. So if I could press Control Z, I press Control Z a couple times to undo. To redo is Shift Control Z. I went back one more because of the scale. Shift Control Z to just go back to this. So you see the values are, again, they're not zeroed out. So I want to apply that. I could, again, do Control A to get the hotkey, but again, in here is Object, Apply, and you can say All Transforms, and it will do them all at the same time. The location will be zeroed out, the rotation will be zeroed out, and the scale will all have 1. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.